John Bound has a report that we're going to post on Infowars.com in the next 20 minutes. And next hour, I'll premiere it here on the radio, dealing with the fact that the CDC is now saying Ebola is now living 42 days, not 21. Details of that coming up. But Wayne Madsen of WayneMadsenReport.com, author, researcher, journalist, he broke the D.C. Madam story, got her on the show right before they killed her, speaking of that. So this is very serious when I talk about death threats. And I mean, there's a reason Glenn Beck now has a security team of 50 people. He's given into the fear, and I feel so sorry for him. I won't do that. It's all in God's hands. But the system is threatening and doing a lot of dirty tricks right now. They got people in government, out of government. It's amazing. They're making their move. Don't let that intimidate you. If you're low level fighting the tyrants, you're under the radar, in my experience. It can do devastating damage in the info war. So don't let their intimidation work on you. I don't talk a lot about this stuff because I don't want to do their work for them. But I believe you're not cowards and will take action and get prepared to speak out. But the enemy is moving on all fronts. Wayne Madsen, where would you say we're historically right now, A? And then B, I want to look at Ebola because we've got an International Business Times article, CBS, you name it, are attacking us, that we dare say that it could be made in a bioweapon lab when the West has admittedly been weaponizing Ebola, not just South Africa. I mean, we'd have to be crazy not to at least look at that. So what's your take on Ebola? And then we'll move into a lot of other areas. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, Alex, good to see you, hear you again. But anyway, I have a story up today on Ebola. If we remember, the first outbreak of Ebola was in 1976 in then Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo. If you remember, back then, the news reports at the time, including the CBS, NBC, ABC, all said this is a terrible disease. It causes the organs in the body to turn into a jellified mass. It's 88% fatal. There were outbreaks at first in southern Sudan and then in Zaire. Then we were told that it was contained in these hot zones. There was even a movie made about it with Dustin Hoffman called The Hot Zone, about the outbreak of this hemorrhagic fever in Reston, Virginia. There actually is a Reston form of the Ebola virus, but it's supposedly the least harmful.
But it is airborne, if that's the one that got out in '89.
The original World Health Organization reports out of Zaire in '76 said it could be transmitted by airborne means. That's not me saying that. That's the World Health Organization. But remember, in 1976, the CIA, then headed by George H.W. Bush, was fighting an illegal war in Angola using Zaire as a base. Zaire became a major CIA base, not only for supporting the guerrillas fighting the government in Angola, but also helping the southern Sudanese rebels against the government in Khartoum. So Zaire was a major, turned into a major petri dish for Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who was the CIA's Dr. Frankenstein, more like Dr. Strangelove, who came up with all these diseases that would attack humans, crops, and animals. And then there was even cross-species jumping from animals to humans.
And imagine how bad it is now with all the DNA and RNA control they have. And that's exactly what the South African press, mainline press, reported that was declassified in these hearings in the 90s. And that's who Wouter Basson worked for, was just a front for the CIA. And let's not forget Israel. Israel has admitted to some of the fact of working with him.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned Basson. Project Coast. He was Gottlieb's South African counterpart, and Basson. Remember, Stephen Hatfield was identified as a person of interest in the anthrax a postal mailing incident, and the FBI sent teams to South Africa and Zimbabwe to investigate Hatfield's role in helping the Rhodesian Selous Scouts. Again, in the 1970s, in the same time frame, we had the Ebola outbreak in Zaire and also South Africa's bio-war programs. And in South Africa, it was Project Coast, headed up by Basson.
And then the word is, by the 80s, for nuke technology, we know South Africa got nukes right before they traded race bioweapons to Israel for the nukes.
Absolutely. So that was an unholy alliance between Israel and South Africa, and also the CIA and Rhodesia to basically foment these and support these civil wars in places like Rhodesia and Angola and Southwest Africa. And also they were active in Zaire and southern Sudan. So there was a reason we saw the first Ebola outbreaks in southern Sudan and Zaire, because that's where the agency was active in using these countries and these poor people who had no idea what was happening to them as petri dishes. Now, the charge that people got this from eating bushmeat, I think that's a pejorative comment by people trying to say, oh, well, it's those Africans eating fruit bats and dead animals they find on the ground. I think it's racist to suggest that, because the first person who contracted Ebola in southern Sudan in 1976 was a cotton factory worker. He had a middle management job. He was educated. And the second person in Zaire was a school headmaster. So to suggest that these people were somehow living off the land, I think was ridiculous. I think the CIA put that information out to basically, you mentioned the Kill the Messenger movie. Well, they were trying to kill the first victims of Ebola by character assassination.
Well, Wayne, what's amazing about you, and I'm just pointing this out for listeners, I hope they realize what they're hearing. I've done deep research into this. And it doesn't matter what subject I bring up, you've done just as deep or more, and without notes, are just spouting all the data. I mean, I just don't know how you've done so much research. It really is amazing, and always great to have you on as an analyst. I think we need to hire you as a routine correspondent, at least part-time. That's all I've got in the budget. And I know you were here last year. We were talking about that, but I got caught up in other stuff and had some funding issues, but we're doing better right now. I mean, just there's so much that you know. What's your gut on this Ebola and where it's going? What do you think it's really all about?
I'm suspicious where we had the outbreak this time in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. These three countries are very, very rich in natural resources, especially gold, diamonds, and iron ore in Guinea. The first case in Guinea was very close to this Simandou mining tract, which was actually long sought after by the richest guy in Israel named Benny Steinmetz, who actually tried to foment a coup d'etat when he had his mining rights stripped from him by the government of Guinea, because he was caught trying to overthrow the government. So they reacted and said, look, you're not going to do business here anymore. And the FBI put Steinmetz under investigation for violating the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, because he was accused of paying bribes to the previous government of Guinea. The new government, President Condé, basically canceled all the agreements with Steinmetz. And I find it very interesting that the first Ebola case in Guinea, which is the Zaire, the very deadly Zaire strain, not the other less harmful strains like the Thai forest strain from Ivory Coast or the Sudan strain, it struck very close to this iron mine tract, the Simandou tract in Guinea. And then that was the tri-border area of Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. And it didn't take long for it to cross that very porous border and then hit major metropolitan areas, the capitals of Liberia, Monrovia, and also Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone. The only other time there was an outbreak in a metropolitan area was in Libreville, the capital of Gabon, in 2002, but that was quickly isolated. So this is the first time we've seen Ebola hit major metropolitan areas, Monrovia and Freetown, which allowed it to spread first to Nigeria, to Lagos, and also then to Europe and the United States.
From your research, do you think it is a souped-up strain, or are they just letting it spread? And then B, why are they letting it spread? Clearly, the default is let it spread, not just in Africa, but here. What's happening?
Well, it's amazing. I think there may be some truth to the fact that this was yet the use of Africa, not as a petri dish like they used Zaire to just test it out on a human population in '76, and then we had outbreaks periodically in Zaire and the neighboring Republic of Congo after that. But I think this is basically this is destroyed basically the public health infrastructures of Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. A number of government workers have died from Ebola. And we even have heard the leaders of those countries say that it's going to have a long-term effect. Excuse
Sure,
me.
clearly they use Al-Qaeda to destabilize the Middle East. They use Ebola to destabilize countries that aren't giving all the resources up for nothing. And they have major newspapers with virologists saying it's been cooked up, and then our media makes fun of it. When Africa's been hit by secret biological testing, it's been declassified. It's like your next-door neighbors robbed you once, you get robbed again. They're the main suspect. You'd have to be insane not to think it could be staged. And the system's doing everything it can to delist us on Alexa, blackball us on Google News, take our White House petition down that was very serious about banning Liberian and West African flights that other countries have done. They are really trying to censor us. It's not working. They see us skyrocketing in our internal numbers. And so they're trying to really put the brakes on what we're doing because people don't believe in the system anymore. And we're talking about real meat and potatoes issues here, not dumbed down fake left-right garbage. To mainstream media people at International Business Times and others, CBS News, you name it, making jokes about us saying, this could be a bioweapon, this could be on purpose. When you do that, when it's even in BBC News, this has gone on, and it appears to be, and you've got government leaders in Africa with real scientists saying this, you sign on to that evil. This isn't funny. It isn't funny to just sign on and say, oh, there's none of this going on. Wayne, what do you make of the Pentagon? Again, the troops themselves I find to be very awake and great people, and the veterans, but the direction of it, the militarization, the military operating domestically, they had a general come out and say, posse comitatus doesn't exist, basically. That's a very arrogant statement. What's your take on that, Wayne Madsen? Then we'll go to break, come back and take calls.
I'm always suspicious anytime anything involves NORTHCOM, Northern Command, because when NORTHCOM was first formed after 9/11, my take on it was directly a violation of posse comitatus. And the mere fact that Obama's reacted to Ebola, both in this country and in Africa, by marshaling up military resources. When you look at Cuba, that is sending very good doctors, and they're known for their very good doctors, they're sending doctors to West Africa, and we're sending AFRICOM troops and supplements over there. And I just don't understand how you're going to defeat Ebola with military force, especially when you realize that Ebola and these other hemorrhagic viruses have all been basically tampered with and spliced and
by the Army.
Fort Detrick, by the Army, yeah. The Army Command Biological Warfare activity of Fort Detrick, Maryland.
Yeah, it's the Army that's the master of this, and probably there to monitor and probably pull blood and mutations off of, and of course the troops are being given a few hours. It said, I think, 5 hours of biological training before they do this. I mean, that sounds like a recipe for disaster to me.
Yeah, it just takes one person over in West Africa to forget to wear their suits, their hazmat suits, because they're hot anyway. Even if you wear them in a temperate climate, you can imagine what they're like over in a place like West Africa.
Or you've got to get out of them and decontaminate. That's usually when you end up getting it. Eddie in New York, you had a point earlier, but we went to break. So restate what you were saying and get Wayne Madsen's take on it.
Yes, sir. No, I was just saying is that they have set up so many nails in place to drop the hammer that they have all these fail-safes set up, such as Russia, crisis in Ukraine, ISIS, Ebola, and to actually know where they're going to drop the hammer is kind of hard to say. But they have all these nails set up in place, so this way, if one fails, they can drop it on this one, or they can drop it on that one. And it's a lot harder for them since 9/11. Excuse me.
No, I agree with you. I mean, it's a lot harder for them to stage something where they can really get caught, where they run the whole thing themselves. It's easier to just use a crisis that's either already there or that's easier for them to hide that they're behind to then pose as the saviors. Wayne Madsen, look at who they chose, this Al Gore minion who's always presides over divvying up any crisis, divvying up the billions to insiders. No medical training, no intelligence training, no military training. And then Obama golfs all day and doesn't even have Ebola meetings. What's it look like to you?
Well, Ron Klein is a Washington fix-it man. He's You know, he was the guy that led the Gore operation in Florida when we had the contested election in '02. Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised. Where is the Surgeon General in this? I know there's not a confirmed Surgeon General. The Senate has dragged its feet on confirming Obama's pick, but there's got to be an acting Surgeon General. I mean, where is somebody like C. Everett Koop, who was in the front of another disease that looks like it was traced back to CIA petri dishes of the '80s, and that was HIV/AIDS. Also decimated Africa's population. And the first people that actually brought it to the Western Hemisphere were Cuban troops fighting against CIA proxies in Angola that were infected when they got back to Cuba. And then, of course, we had the Mariel boat lift, and well, we know the rest of that story, how it spread over here. But anyway, yeah, Klein is a typical Washington fix-it man, and he's a PR flack. So, you know, just a few days ago, we heard that a lady on a shuttle bus at the Pentagon was heading down to the Marine Corps Commandant's change of command ceremony at the Marine Barracks on 8th Street in downtown D.C., and she started projectile vomiting. And then she said she had just been in West Africa. Well, we see what happens when you bring a guy like Klein on board. They said, oh, that lady never even had a passport. So
and we've got aircraft coming in out of West Africa, people dying, vomiting. They land at NYC, JFK, and they say, no problem. They don't have it without a test. I think it's safe to say, Wayne, that clearly they're covering up how many cases are in Africa and here.
I think so, because this is why they bring a guy like Klein on board, because he's going to put pressure on the corporate media to keep it quiet. You know, anytime we see something like this happens, it's just like 9/11, by the way. Remember, they told people, well, you didn't see what you saw. Sorry, you had your facts wrong. And, you know, I was just, as a matter of fact, last month I was in New York speaking at 9/11 commemorative function. And there's some new photographs that were released of that. And they were telling even reporters on the scene, oh, you must have been mistaken. It's the same thing. It's how the government deals with catastrophes.
Eddie?
Yes.
Absolutely. Eddie, thank you so much for the call from New York. We're going to come back and go to Daniel, listening on WBCR 1470 in Knoxville, Lona, Charlie, and Sean, and many others. Wayne Madsen is our guest. Wide open phones, 800-259-9231. Infowars.com is the tip of the spear. He's with us to the bottom of the hour. We'll talk some about his book before he leaves us, The Star and the Sword. Well, they want to lock a bunch of people up and put us in their pretty pens once an epidemic turns into a pandemic in this country. And I always go back to this because for me, it's what really hits home. That if you watch the news and read the newspaper for 25 years, like I've done, 20 years on air, but if you're like 60, 70 years old, you've been doing it for 40, 50 years, how do you not know that some shadow government, COG that Eisenhower warned about, isn't in control? And then the documents all come out in the church hearings in the 70s and confirm it all. They just know the public is ignorant of all these facts, so they play this game going, oh, he's a conspiracy theory, or he's crazy. Thousands of different tests, hundreds of them lethal. In some cases, one of those hundreds of lethal secret programs would kill thousands of people, sterilize hundreds of thousands, kill millions. HIV, clearly cooked up by the Navy and the Army. Clearly, they had declassified programs for autoimmune viruses to reduce population. You got Bill Gates running around and the Rockefellers talking about it constantly. These outbreaks keep happening in Africa. And then the average liberal trendy goes, well, there are too many people. But then they'll tell you you're a racist if you don't support government-run health care. I mean, it's like crazy that the big secret religion is population reduction. And then people say, well, Africa's population still went up. Must not be doing too good, killing everybody. Some African countries, 45% of the people have HIV. Tens upon tens of millions have died. And now Ebola's popping up that we know our governments were souping up. South African, European countries, Israeli, U.S. I mean, I played a BBC News clip earlier about it. It's on Infowars.com, that they weaponized Ebola. They had Ebola that was airborne in 1989 on the East Coast that got out. Of course they're making this stuff. And then we go, hey, the groups that make this stuff, maybe they're behind it. Kind of like maybe the government's behind the anthrax attack. Turns out it was U.S. government anthrax. Then they had a whole bunch of patsies they tried to blame. I want to go to your phone calls. Wayne Madsen's our guest. But Wayne, finishing up on this subject, again, former NSA officer, whistleblower, talking to your sources, where do they think, and where do you think this Ebola thing is going? I mean, you pretty much came out and said that you think it's a false flag and where it originated. And what's their bottom line here? Because politically, it's hurting them not to respond. But more and more, they know he's a lame duck, so they don't care. They've got pardons. They can resuscitate him in the media later, like they've done the Clintons and the Bushes and others. What's the grand plan here?
Well, my fear is that, we've had Hollywood doing a lot of predictive programming on this. The latest one is this latest Planet of the Apes movie, where most of the human population is wiped out by something called simian flu. We know that Ebola is transmitted also from non-human primates, monkeys, chimpanzees, and gorillas. So my fear is what they're doing is they want to set up the first regime in the United States where they're going to have mandatory quarantine regions. They're going to have mandatory checks. They're going to do highway checks and get people used to what happens to them every day at the airport is going to happen on interstate highways and other major roads. And where will they set up the checkpoints? Wherever they darn well please. You can imagine that way stations and toll stops are just made to order for this type of thing. But I think that's where we're going. They want to condition the American people to be able to do internal travel prohibitions and at the very least travel checks.
And Bill Clinton wrote back in 1998, we cover it in my 2000 film, Police State 2000. I mean, we show the statements, the executive orders about in the future, they would have hardened internal checkpoints at the state level, searching everyone, and a culture where you've got to give blood to get a driver's license and all this stuff. That's only begun the last 2 years in places like D.C. on a trial basis. Whatever they plan, they end up getting it, even if it's late. And you can see them, Wayne, as you just said, rolling this out. It follows where the border is open, but they have internal checkpoints at the airports. And illegals can fly, but citizens can't without being searched. And illegals can have bank accounts with no ID, but citizens have to. They're setting the precedent under this globalist model where you have internal checkpoints, but no longer national borders. It's completely upside down, but that is what they're doing.
And that's my fear. And that's why I think we have Northcom involved with this these Ebola SWAT teams. Late Friday, Obama did something very interesting. I'd say it's late. I'm glad he did it. He issued an executive order at like 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon when most of the media is not paying attention, basically saying there will be no more research, government-sponsored research on these coronaviruses. That doesn't include Ebola, but it includes things like SARS, MERS, and influenza, avian flu, swine flu, the 1918 Spanish flu, which government scientists brought back to life after getting DNA from a dead Inuit girl who died of it in 1918.
That killed like 100 million people worldwide, and they dug it up.
Obama said all that research is to cease and desist immediately, and any future research has to be pre-approved by the government, and he put no time limit on it. I just wonder what happened when he started looking at things like Ebola, how this thing started. Did he actually find the government's own fingerprints on this? And he said, well, I can't stop research on Ebola because it's a clear and present danger, but all this other stuff, like what's been going on at the University of Wisconsin in Madison on resurrecting the 1918 flu by recombining DNA from dead viruses to current viruses.
That's insane.
He stopped all that. I hope it stays stopped, but a lot of people in the medical community applauded him for that. But I just wonder what triggered, because we know he doesn't do this unless, he's pressured. He doesn't take these initiatives on his own. I'd be very interested to be a fly on the wall inside one of those Ron Klein meetings to hear what prompted this action.
Well, as I've always pointed out, the 36 level 4 bioweapons facilities under BioShield are the clear and present danger. because they've got some of them in level 2 facilities with level 4 pathogens on the coastline in Galveston, a city that gets wiped out every decade. I mean, it just got wiped out 6 years ago, and it wrecked the facility. I mean, here's an example. Lionfish in the 80s, when a hurricane hit Miami, something like 14 of them that were in a tank got out, and now the entire Caribbean and Atlantic are just full of them because they breed so fast, killing everything. It's an invasive species, poisonous, and it's all because they had no natural predators in this area. Well, I mean, that's a fish, folks. Imagine all these facilities with zoological crossing it. It is a recipe for disaster. Let's go to your calls. Let's talk to Daniel in Tennessee, listening on 1470 WBCR. Daniel, you're on the air.
Thank you very much. I'm watching the clock. I'll be to the point. First of all, I call him Alibaba because he's a prince of thieves and liars. Anyway, you asked at the beginning of the program on your opener there, Alex, that what do you think is the next step? I really believe, and I speak professionally, I really believe that his next step is going to wait until after the November selection. Then he'll declare martial law and appoint himself president for life. I do not underestimate this devil. Thank you for listening.
Well, thanks for holding to say that. We're going to skip this network break because this is so important. I want to go to everybody. You know, it wouldn't help the establishment to keep him in because politically he is worthless right now. People are exiting his events en masse. Reuters reports Obama makes rare campaign trail appearance. People leave early, but they do so many crazy wild cards now. Obama could be the false flag. They could assassinate him or try to and blame it on a libertarian or patriot group to create a race war or civil war. Or they could wound him, and then he would declare he was, you know, a dictator during the emergency transition. Who knows? Wayne, what's your take on that?
Well, you know, although I think we are suffering in this country from a plutocracy. We don't get a lot of choice for president. DC also, they don't want to keep the same people around. They get tired of, you know, his magic has worn off. And now we're talking about, you know, in 2016, well, it's Hillary Clinton or maybe Jeb Bush. Here we go again. Bush for beat Clinton. There's some talk of Romney. I mean, he's not going away. But so that's the choice we have. It's not much of a choice, but they do get tired of their heroes in Washington, and they like to run them out of town and get somebody else in there. But somebody else who we all know is part of the system.
Sure, it's like shark teeth. I mean, once they get dull and used, another row rolls forward. So I don't see them keeping Obama in. But what about the false flag of them actually taking Obama out?
No, I am surprised at all these revelations about the Secret Service. That was one agency that I found it was very hard to crack that as far as getting sources. The only time I actually had any sources is in the 1990s during that whole Monica issue and the fights between Clinton and Hillary. I found out where the watering hole was for the president's protective detail. And I used to hang out there on Thursdays because I knew that's when they were there. And I got all the stories about her, throwing ashtrays and lamps at him. That's the only time there was a crack in that very, very secure wall of information about the president from the Secret Service. But all these recent disclosures about the in Colombia and all this other stuff.
Well, the FBI leaks that Hillary literally chews the carpet, and that was confirmed. I've had some Secret Service
later. Yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. What?
I heard that in L.A. later in about '98. I was there right after the 3-day Columbus Day, 3-day holiday, and I was actually in Beverly Hills, and I heard that her and one of her friends was, basically, I hate to use it, holed up there over the weekend.
Well, that was not a double entendre when I said that she's on the carpet. I mean, literally throws fits on the ground.
Yeah.
But now I get your, well, we all know it's public now that she, anyways, let's move away from that subject for a moment. Do you think that would be an issue in the campaign, though, that they now admit she's got a string of girlfriends and is probably more of a sex addict than Bill Clinton?
Well, it didn't seem to hurt Obama because everybody in Chicago seemed to know about him even before he was president. So, I guess this is the new, this is the new paradigm now. It used to be that you could be blackmailed for stuff like that, but I guess nowadays even though they're not out, they're not open about it. I guess they don't fear the blackmailing.
Well, I mean, I think it's selective because you'll see them go after libertarian or conservative people for absolutely nothing, and then the Democrats can swing by chandeliers. That's my problem with it.
Right. I was recently attacked when I went to a conference in Tehran of authors and journalists and other people, clerics, and Senator Mark Kirk from Illinois decided to attack me by name for going over to what he called an anti-Semitic hate fest. But I just put the word out. Hey, look, when I was investigating Obama in Chicago, I also found out that Senator Mark Kirk, who was divorced after 18 years of marriage, was also known to be a closeted homosexual, and then he had a stroke, but he's still in the Senate, ostensibly representing Illinois Republican family values. So here we go again with more hypocrisy from.
Well, I'm a libertarian. My issue is that I'm a Christian and have a lot of those values, but I don't like the Pharisee arm of this, using it to attack people and demonize people. That's why I don't get into the whole issue. But then on the reverse of that, you have the mayor of Houston wanting to arrest and subpoena preachers that are criticizing homosexuality. Whether you agree with that or disagree with that, I mean, this is getting dangerous when they're going after the First Amendment.
And it sounds like Rahm Emanuel may be her other advisor, the mayor of Houston, based on his time as mayor of Chicago. I thought it was interesting that the woman who was basically challenging Emanuel recently was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and it looks like she won't be the candidate.
Oh.
She was best placed to beat Emanuel. So here we go again.
Well, they declassified. They've got those fast-acting cancers.
That's right. That's right. And I think Hugo Chavez and what happened to him is proof positive that Sidney Gottlieb's work at the CIA has been perfected and is still in use today, not only with Ebola, HIV, and this other stuff, but also with these targeted, because Gottlieb basically came up with medical ways to dispatch Patrice Lumumba in Congo. Here's Congo again, and also Fidel Castro in Cuba.
Well, I want to keep you a little bit longer if you can, so we can get your take on Kill the Messenger, but I want to take calls. Have you seen Kill the Messenger? I
did, and I was in email contact with Gary Webb shortly before his death, and he contacted me because I was doing an expose of a company out of Dallas called.
Hold that till after calls, because here's the deal. He was in contact with me. I was going to put a website out for his new book. There was going to be another book after Kill the Messenger. He'd written that, proving the whole network. And he was telling people that he was getting threatened. He told me that. He told Free Ricky Ross that. And then they killed him, and then they had this known CIA guy who bragged he was in the CIA threatening me and saying I was full of it, and he was going to sue me. And then it turned out Webb didn't like him and had criticized him. I don't want to speak ill of the dead. The other guy's dead now, too. But it was just amazing that they killed him, Wayne. We'll talk about it in the next segment. I got to go to calls, but it's just amazing how they killed him. He was awesome. Lona in Utah, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, Wayne. Thanks for taking my call. I have two comments for you. This is Lana in Salt Lake. And first of all, I want to tell you that I buy the bottled drinks at the health food store, and then I recycle those bottles with the Pro Pure water. I put them in the 6-pack bags that you can get at Whole Foods, so they're ready to go. We don't have to drink out of the poisonous plastic bottles anymore. And then the second comment I wanted to make, I was out one Friday with some friends, and they were contrailing the skies in Salt Lake like you cannot believe. The worst I have ever seen, ever. And they were crisscrossing the skies, and I thought, this means victory. This is a victory for them. I came home. I listened to your show. You had announced that they had introduced Ebola into the country, and I believe it was their symbol that they made victory.
All right, Lona, thank you so much, and God bless you. I want to move quick here, but there is geoengineering going on. It is classified, but the fact that they're spending billions a year is not. And guess who heads it up? Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Again, I want to go to Charlie, and I want to go to Sean and Lucas and others here in a moment. But bottom line, Where is Bill Gates in the power structure? It seems like he's involved in everything.
Yeah, and now we know with more revelations about the close connection between private companies and NSA. You know, these companies said, oh, well, we didn't know that this NSA program was going on. Well, now we know, in fact, they were involved with it. And I reported many, many years ago that Microsoft actually has an office at NSA in Fort Meade to handle basically surveillance issues of people using Microsoft products. When NSA had an issue breaking into some password or firewall associated with a Microsoft product, there was a help desk manned by Microsoft people at NSA that they could call and resolve these issues. So
but that's what you reported 20 years ago when you first went public, was that every major telecom had whole floors with the NSA hubbed in.
Yeah, and AT&T was part of it. As all remember the Clipper chip, these companies were all trying to make money on that, while at the same time they said, well, we're opposed to the government trying to control the private use.
That's the key, is they were paid in aggregate billions a year to, quote, service it all.
Right, exactly.
And so now the NSA is rolling out its own wireless network to cut out the middleman.
Yeah, the only guy that fought against that was the CEO of Quest, Mr. Naccio, and they put him in prison because he wouldn't play ball. They got him on some insider trading trumped up deal, which, you know, these federal prosecutors can indict a ham sandwich if they want to.
It's amazing, Wayne. We're going to go to break and come back and take more calls. We'll just keep you the whole rest of the show if you can do it. You're always so interesting on air, and I think you're on fire today. But let's start getting into web right now, and we'll come back with calls. I've been physically attacked and told you better shut up. I've been death threatened. I've had them call up and describe what just happened in the front yard or the backyard and say, yeah, we're listening, buddy. And, you know, it's a really mean guy's voice. I've had the women call up and run psyops on my family, on my wife. I've had them infiltrate the operation. I don't even want to get into it. It's just unbelievable. But that's what I expect doing this. But I just don't know how they find so many evil people to be part of it. It's so creepy, and it's so illegal. And then Gary Webb, who had another book coming out, a website coming out, he was talking to all these alternative journalists. He left the San Jose Mercury News. He was vindicating himself. And then he had people breaking in his house over and over again. And then they shot him twice in the head. I mean, how obvious is that they killed him? But then I'm blown away that the movie comes out and pretty much tells the truth. What does that say about Hollywood?
Well, you know, how many times have we actually seen Hollywood give news that we can't get from the news? I mean, it's kind of all messed around, topsy-turvy now, where people get their news from Jon Stewart, a comedian, than from, the Brian Williams or these other talking heads on these other networks. But Webb contacted me because I was looking at this company called Affiliated Computer Systems out of Dallas, and this was in 2004, and I was concerned based on what I was hearing that there was going to be another attempt to manipulate the election, as we saw in 2000.
And again, he died right then. Come back. Let's talk about that straight ahead. I mean, Gary Webb was digging into a lot of stuff. He was an award-winning journalist, and they killed him and then scared everybody around him to go along with it being suicide. That happens to me, folks. I will never commit suicide, 100%. Know it. And neither will Wayne Madsen. Stay with us.
Well, it's called The Star and the Sword. And, ever since 9/11, I'm actually right now pursuing yet another angle on 9/11, which came to me just recently. But, people said, well, I was the one who received this DEA report on these mysterious Israeli art students who were penetrating security at various places before 9/11. And then, of course, I got that list, remember, of all the suspects, had Atta and all the rest of the hijackers and all these other Saudis and other people on it. And in addition to the guy who was running the urban moving systems, the Israeli-owned moving company in New Jersey. And I said, I got thinking, people said, no, the Israelis were behind it. No, the Saudis were behind it. But, what we see with ISIL or ISIS or Islamic State or whatever they're calling themselves this week, they're being supported by not only the Saudis and their friends, these potentates on the Persian Gulf, but also, as we see in the Golan Heights, they're being supported by the Israeli Defense.
And that's not anti-Israel when it's in the Jerusalem Post that Israel's government is supporting al-Qaeda. It's a fact. And as you said, why did Fox News, when 9/11 happened, they did 4 reports on the Israelis getting arrested as well? Was that some inner blackmail fight going on?
I heard it was Cheney had a big fight with then Sharon, Ariel Sharon, the prime minister of Israel, and wanted to send a message to the Israeli government. Look, we know what's going on. And he handed part of that DEA report. It was about 64 pages, if I recall. He handed part of it to Britt Hume, who attended the vice president's Christmas party in early December '01. And of course, a week and a half later, Fox ran with that 4-part series. I heard that was what prompted it. But remember back in Desert Storm, Saddam Hussein was firing scuds not only at Israel, but also at Saudi Arabia. These 2 countries, I'm suggesting in the book, The Star and the Sword, have had a long-term relationship going back to the 70s and 60s with a group of intelligence agencies called the Safari Club. But even back to post-World War I, when the first Saudi king, Ibn Saud, sent a letter to Chaim Weizmann, the head of the World Zionist movement, saying, look, we Sauds have no problem with you establishing a homeland in Palestine. That's history. And some people want to ignore that history, but I would suggest that link between Riyadh and Jerusalem has been around a lot longer.
Why would Saudi Arabia want to overthrow Libya, overthrow Syria, overthrow Egypt, overthrow Iraq? I mean, I guess so they can take it over.
Part of Netanyahu's he came out with a plan in 1996 called a clean break, or securing the realm. It talked about overthrowing these Arab governments and replacing them with warring factions. There was also the Oded plan formulated by an Israeli in 1982 that called for the same thing. So when we saw Wesley Clark come out and say he saw a list of governments that we're going to overthrow in the region, it's the same list. It's the same plan. Clark didn't disagree with it. He just said he saw it after 9/11. Look, what Clark saw, the Oded plan, the clean break plan, and Netanyahu, which was
Sure.
basically written by Richard Pearl, it's all the same thing. And we're seeing it played out now with ISIS.
Sure.
Realize the ISIS represents 12,000 mercenaries from 81 different countries. A lot of them haven't stepped foot in a mosque in their entire lives. They have no linkage to Islam. So what do you call that? It's a mercenary army.
It's a CIA secret army. And my issue is, if these Arab countries are really attacking us, it'd be one thing. But over and over again, the West stirs them up, arms the radical group to go into friendly countries like Egypt, try to overthrow them. This is,
yeah.
But it's the same thing. Shut our businesses down. Shut our economy down. It's not an American government or even Israeli government. It's just these criminal networks that get power out of crises. And then they're taking my liberties and your liberties and our children's liberties in the name of al-Qaeda that they run. I want the fraud to end. Just like they're letting Ebola in, and then they're going to let it get out of control.
They're not going to stop with Iraq or Syria. They're going to. When I was in Iran recently, I was in a car traveling between Shiraz and a town on the way to the Persian Gulf, and I noticed Iranian police were stopping cars, and I asked, what are they doing? And my driver said, oh, well, they're stopping people that look like they're Arabs to see if they're members of ISIL. I said, interesting. You think they're in the country? And then I started asking, and yes, they've crossed into over the Iranian border. They're going after the Iranian government next. And we also had a situation in Syria where the largely Tunisian commanders of ISIL were actually turned on by Chechens and from Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, and Uyghurs from Western China. They beheaded these guys. These were pretty good commanders, and replaced them because the CIA, the Saudis, and the Israelis eventually want ISIL to go after Russia and China, and Chechens and Uyghurs are the ones they're going to use to do that. And look, what's happening in Hong Kong right now, these protests are a carbon copy of what took place in Maidan Square in Kiev. This is a direct assault on China. ISIL is not going to stop at Iran. They're going to go into Western China. They're going to go into southern Russia.
All right, we got to go to calls. They've been holding. Charlie in Canada, thanks for holding. Then we'll go to Sean, Indigo Kid, and Anthony. Go ahead.
Alex, I owe you a heartfelt thank you. I've had a disease called sarcoidosis for 25 years. I've been critically ill for 14. I ordered the oxy powder, and it knocked it out of me literally in 6 days.
Well, we can't make medical claims, but I only sell stuff that's blown my socks off, literally. Oxy powder, it's time-released oxygen, releases in the small and large intestine, or large and then small intestine, and it just, other herbal flushes and stuff are very painful. This is just life-changing. I was pushed for a year to carry it, pushed for a year to promote it. I was just like, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm not into that stuff. And it really has been amazing and made my waist size go down personally, and has just done a lot of stuff. I mean, what happened when you took it?
Well, at first, I got, it wasn't uncomfortable. I kind of felt my stomach bubble up a little bit, but it wasn't too bad. And literally the next day, I woke up and something was different. And within 2 days, I was walking around my house again. There are parts of my house I haven't seen in 10 years, literally.
You were in so much pain in your stomach? Your intestines?
Actually, I had joint pain, hives. I had lesions on my head that are healing now. My system has been so toxic.
Well, they say 70% of the immune system is in the gut, and so if that's messed up, then you just literally, I mean, most skin stuff, dermatologists will tell you, is based in the gut. And look, John Harmon told me today, in fact, John, if you've got the mic hooked up there in Minnesota, we're in Austin, come on and tell folks what you told me today about oxy powder.
Sure. I just popped in Alex's ear and told them that I do take the phone calls here at the network, and just influx of callers calling in about the oxy powder, just saying, hey, I need to be on the air necessarily, but just pass on the word that stuff definitely works.
Yeah, folks, we don't sell stuff unless I've had dramatic effects. For a year, groups like, you got to try this. This is my star product. Alex, I'm telling you, I'll private label it for you. This is the best thing I've ever made. Hollywood all uses it. Look at this, look at that. And he goes, Alex, you want to be healthy? You've done this stuff, do this. And I'm just like, you know what, man? I don't want to go on air and pitch something for my intestines. I mean, talk about what it does. But I go, okay, I'll take it. Unbelievable. Started taking it about 2 months ago. Only take it a few days a week. Take like 5 capsules at night. In the morning, just get ready. And my stomach, my mom, I was at my parents' house with the kids swimming Saturday, and my mom walks over and she goes, are you on something? And I go, what do you mean? She goes, well, you've been working out hard, looking better, but she goes, my God, you look like you're 20 again. Your muscles, your stomach, it's almost gone. What is going on? And I said, iodine and oxy powder. And I said, I'm scared of this, Ebola, so I'm taking everything now. I'm finally just taking the full amount, not forgetting every other day. And she went, well, I want some of that. And I still don't look that good because I've gotten in bad shape, but I look a lot better. And it's just amazing. I didn't mean to go off on a big jag. We need to send Wayne some of this and see what happens to him. But thank you for that plug, sir. Yes, it's the real deal. InfoWarsLife.com. Sean in Ohio. Sean, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi, Alex. How are you today?
Good, brother. Go ahead.
Well, I'm calling from Akron, Ohio, as you well know, is the second destination of Amber Vincent. She recently was in the Northfield neighborhood here where we live, visiting family and friends.
Yeah, you're talking about the nurse with Ebola.
Correct. Yeah, she was taking care of, I think it was Mr. Duncan down there in Texas. And we got some, my wife's a nurse, and, we've been really closely monitoring the situation, as has everyone else here in Akron. But, there's a lot of things that don't seem quite right, and I've got a list of information here for you. I'll try to run through it as quickly as I can.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Basically, there's news that's just come out here locally. I'm not sure if it's national yet, but before, she had treated Mr. Duncan there at the hospital, and she had had a conversation with her Reverend Glenn Lorenzo, I do believe, before she even flew up here to Akron, saying that, she was very unhappy with the gear that she was given to wear while she was treating Mr. Duncan,
and then she called the CDC and said, I have a fever. I worked on a Ebola patient. Can I fly? And they said, yeah, go ahead, Cupcake. I mean, none of this sounds right. Keep going.
Yeah, they went ahead and just let her fly, even though she was symptomatic. First they told us here in Akron that, there's nothing to worry about. She wasn't symptomatic as of the day of her flight. And then it came out afterwards that she was symptomatic as early as Friday. So she spent the whole weekend here in our neighborhood, in our stores and everything else. And so, everyone here is a little bit on edge, but, there's been a lot more going on in this neighborhood prior to this.
Well, listen, what's your bottom line so Wayne can comment?
Well, basically, the bottom line is that, Metro Health came out recently here, which is a hospital, Cleveland Metro, saying that they are prepared for Ebola. And, Mayor Don Pasquale here in Akron said, no, we are not ready for that. We want them to be, if there are anybody that becomes symptomatic, we'd like them to be shipped out to a proper hospital that can deal with it. Margaret Irma, which is the Summit County Public Health Department spokesperson, said that, they would
Sure,
like
it's in total disarray. I got to jump for other callers, Indigo Kid and others, but we get the basis of what you're saying. Could this be, Ebola's real in Africa, but could this be a simulant with people that think they have Ebola? As Mr. Steele said from the CIA a few weeks before this broke, that it could be a simulant and something to create panic. What's your take, Wayne Madsen?
Well, we are getting into flu season after all, so people could get confused. But, remember Obama hosted this Africa summit about a month and a half ago or so, 2 months ago. And I said, why in the world would he be having these private executive jets fly these leaders in who won't be going through the normal security checks or customs immigration checks at the airport, because many of them flew into Andrews Air Force Base and others flew into Dulles and went through the VIP lounge there. And and then we had Frieden, this Tom Frieden, the Dr. Frieden, the head of the CDC, said, "Oh, well, Ebola will never be a problem here in the United States. We're not worried about it." And I said, this guy sounds like a quack. And you know what? His job before he was the head of CDC he was Mayor Bloomberg's director of public health in New York. He's the guy who came up with the ban on big sodas.
A bunch of control freaks. All right, thank you. Indigo Kid and Anthony and Janero, I think is how you say it. Your calls are straight ahead. I'm Alex Jones, Infowars.com. Indigo Kid, you're on the air with Wayne Madsen, our guest. Go ahead, Indigo. Thanks for holding.
Hey, guys. Well, because Ebola has gone airborne in the sense of these flights from West Africa, I wanted to launch something called Operation Airborne Ebola. And just thinking, if people wore the T-shirt I designed, or your shirt, Alex, or design their own, just a permanent marker on a white T-shirt, if every time they go and take a flight in the U.S., they wear these anti-Ebola, anti-Obama shirts, that could be a big news story.
They will try to ban you wearing them, and then it'll become a national news story. Everyone should design their own if they don't want to buy one from us. I totally agree with you, and just show how they, and then say, well, wait, you're allowed to fly it in, but I can't wear a shirt saying it? That's a great idea. Wayne Madsen, your take on that?
Well, I just get back to the whole thing with, I don't think we're being told the truth about this. I think Ron Klein has been brought in to basically put an information cone over news coming out.
A snow job.
Yeah, basically, and how many cases? There was a woman who was also projectile vomiting at one of the train stations in Boston. And they tried to say, oh no, she. You got
Nigerians getting off flights, dying in Houston, dying in New York, vomit everywhere.
Exactly, and I just I'm not buying it. But we're talking about Gary Webb earlier, and I think Gary set the gold standard for shoe leather investigative journalism. I was so happy he contacted me by email, and I never believed he killed himself. I got into a heated argument with somebody who I knew very well, and I worked with this guy who insisted it was suicide, and I was just I just publicly disagreed.
Yeah, that was the guy with the connection to the CIA.
Yeah, same guy. Yeah, I think it's the same. Yeah, it's the same guy. But I talked to many other people who said, look, the one thing the movie said is he got out of journalism, but when he called me, he was working for an alternative newspaper in Sacramento, and he was investigating the same company, ACS, for red light camera fraud. But I think he was looking at it. He contacted me because he knew I was looking at them with potential election machine fraud, voting machine fraud. And I think he had other information. I think he had a great career ahead of him.
Oh, they were scared of his name and the fact that he never backed off, never said he was wrong, and was being vindicated. They couldn't kill his name, so they blew his head off.
Right. And, I think of guys like Gary Webb and other investigative journalists I've known over the years who are no longer with us. Many, died. They just got old, died of cancer and stuff like that. But I try to emulate these people who were basically my mentors in journalism. And that's why I'm getting ready to go pursue yet another angle on 9/11 because that may be 13 years ago, but I'm not going to give up on that story.
No, great job. I want to do 5 more minutes at Overdrive and finish. Then we'll let you get out of here after doing 2 hours with us. But I want to go to Anthony and Janero and Bill if we have time. But the minute we have left in this hour, folks can visit WayneMadsenReport.com if they want to see really hardcore journalism and a guy who isn't, acting like he knows so many angles. He really is super informed. It is a delightful pleasure to have him on for 2 hours and be able to just hear all the factoids and data he brings up, because I've researched so much of this and he knows more than I do on so many fronts, and that's a real pleasure to be able to occasionally actually sit at somebody's feet and learn something. That's the true mark of a master as well, is that you want to learn more and know how much you don't know. But Wayne, as we go to break here, people like Gary Webb will be remembered forever for being honorable in the arena, not backing off when they threatened to kill him and his family. He is the example of a real man, a real human, and all those that helped kill him and were part of it and who went along with it, they are a bunch of cowardly people who I don't think belong to this species. They are absolute just cowards. They have no honor. Back in 60 seconds, take a few final calls in Overdrive. Some stations don't carry it. Infowars.com/show. Yes, one of the greatest things in my life is being able to associate with other informed, honorable people that aren't cowards. And the older I get, the more I just cannot believe how blessed I am to come from an honorable family of good people overall, and that I am not in the company or culture of backstabbing yes men and cowards. I'm just going to say that again here. Anthony in Florida, you're on the air with Wayne Madsen. Go ahead.
Hello, I guess I've got a question or a comment for Mr.
Sure.
Madsen, or a question too.
Sure.
Yes. Okay. A while back, I saw this video, and it showed General David Petraeus, and he was speaking to a group of people, and he made the comment, what comes after America, North America, is in the North American Union. And
Yeah.
I was wondering what the status on that is.
Go ahead, Wayne.
Yeah, well, look what's going on with the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership, which is going to create basically a union of Pacific Rim nations. Now there's also a North America European Trade Partnership. That's what's happening.
Yeah, it's already official. They're already following it. They're already making our governments illegitimate, and the public just doesn't know.
Absolutely, and that's it's all going to be governed by corporations. So unless you're a major stockholder, your vote on election day isn't going to really mean a hill of beans.
Yeah, we're training and stuff, to fight, like the World War II enemy. Meanwhile, it's a corporate enemy in suits that organizes the chaos and then presides over the chaos to wreck our lives and consolidate power. Great question, Anthony. Janero in Arizona, you're on the air. Thanks for holding.
Hi, Alex. Thank you for taking my call. Hi, Wayne. Listen, we spoke a couple of weeks ago about the audacity of the CDC director. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. I really believe that Thomas Duncan and these two nurses do not have Ebola, and this is why. I feel that this is a part of their distraction, diversion, and deflection.
It full well could be. They've been caught doing stuff like this before. But, I mean, there really is Ebola raging across Africa.
No, that I know. The reason I feel that way is because Robert David Steele said they would try to use a biostimulus that acts like Ebola. Here's my reasoning. Because everybody in that household for Thomas David Duncan do not have Ebola.
Yeah, why did the nurses get it, but not the family? It is suspicious. Look, that's the problem with a totally lying government. You can't believe anything they say, so we don't even know. Wayne, your comments.
Well, remember when they sent the woman to Atlanta, I believe it was Amber Vinson.
Yeah, it was.
There was a guy, everyone was wearing these hazmat suits when they were putting on their medevac plane in Dallas, except for the guy in the back who was
in charge.
Clipboard. I mean, the clipboard man has now become as infamous as the babushka lady and the guy with the umbrella on Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 1960.
Well, that's right. And he gets out of the vehicle with them, and then he's touching the gurney and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's immune, Wayne.
I guess he's immune. And so they need to find out what his blood is to try to clone it so they can come up with the vaccine, because he's an amazing human being if he is immune. But yeah, look, there's so much disinformation on this. And as we talked about with flu season coming on, look, I got off of flight from Dubai, flew from Tehran to Dubai. It was Emirates Airways, went to Boston Logan, and of course I had a wonderful reception by the ICE people. Customs, that's another story. But I was held for about an hour and given, under cross-examination without a lawyer. But
well, you weren't illegal. That's why.
Yeah, right. But I just like a week, a little over a week later, that same flight, they had the hazmat guys come on because 5 people were on that same plane with signs or symptoms of Ebola. Maybe they had the flu, but we're going to probably. Yeah. It's just confusion.
Well, maybe he'll ban big soft drinks. That'll save us. WayneMadsenReport.com. Thanks for all the time. Great job. And hey, let's talk soon about getting you to do some correspondent work for us. Thank you so much, Wayne.